Hello, everybody. My name's Kay Gilbert, and I founded and curate the Tennis Parents Community. We're a Facebook group of 3,000 tennis parents, all with children training in the GB system. And we've come together to support each other, try and get our heads around this crazy world of tennis as a parent, and see how we can best do the best that we can for our children. Now, everybody's circumstances are different, so what that looks like may vary from family to family. But by sharing with each other, we try and work out the best route for our children. If you are not already a member of the Tennis Parents Community and you're a parent in Britain, have a look for us on Facebook. We're a group that you can join. And if you're internationally based and watching this, you will no doubt have already found the YouTube channel where we've got many recordings of sessions like this with different experts from the world of tennis that you can watch back. And those are available to everybody, tennis coaches as well, and anybody else interested to watch back. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm really pleased that we're joined by Faye Button this evening. Faye is a chartered physiotherapist. So some of you may have met her on the circuit because she does work as a self-employed tournament physio for the LTA from time to time at some of their events. When she's not courtside, Faye is a lecturer in physiotherapy, of course, at the University of Lincoln. Faye played a lot of tennis herself. I'm going to find out how much in a moment. But she did play when she was younger, so she's got a lived understanding of the sport as well. Welcome to the Tennis Parents Community, Faye Button.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and inviting me, Kay.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's really good of you to give up your time. I always mention that, of course, we don't pay anyone to come on the sessions that we do. So we're really grateful for your time and your expertise. And perhaps we could just start by asking you a little bit about your own childhood in tennis and find out what you got up to and how your parents supported you as a young player.
Yeah, I was going to say this is definitely something I'm sure they would have been very appreciative of. So thank you for all you're doing as well, Kay. I'll give away my age then, I suppose. I started the sport when I was about 6. Very privileged, very fortunate when I was younger, very thankful of my parents. Threw me at everything, tried everything, every sport going. And funnily enough, I think, well, no, I can remember it quite vividly. I was having swimming lessons at a local country park and saw this dome structure and thought, what on earth's going on in there? So we went and investigated, and sure enough, that was one of the closest tennis bubbles to us in rural Lincolnshire. So started going along every
Wow,
Saturday.
indoor tennis, hey? That's that's a
Tennis.
privilege in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. But
Ah.
yes, at least we're out of the rain that we're unfortunately having at the minute. So yeah, got involved very young, age 6. Went along every Saturday morning, as I'm sure that's the entry for most of those that are here today. And loved it and stuck at it. Very fortunate with the opportunities. Being a girl as well, we'll probably come on to that later too. Um, so that was me, age 6, and worked hard and got to age 9 and made it to my county cup event, local East Midlands County Cup at Nottingham Tennis Centre, and again had a great time in a team. Lots of time on your own on the tennis court as well, as you all know. So very privileged to be involved in the county cup events and did that through my teens up until mid-teens and got the call up to County Week for Lincolnshire ladies. So some great summers and winters away on that too. But again, something else I'd really like to promote tonight as well is the other roles that I've been lucky enough to get invited to, working up to this job as a physiotherapist. Just always keen to give back and just I'm not very opinionated. I've just told Kay, don't have a lot to say, but I can talk and talk about tennis. So sure enough, showed willing to get involved with the organising of County Week. So soon became the ladies team secretary, organising the team and the accommodation. That got me on my Lincolnshire committee too in my late teens. And then again, sure enough, did the pathway through level 1, helping out my local club when I was about 15, 16. Again on Saturday mornings, through to level 2 to start to earn some pennies in a nice way. And then did level 3 when I went off to university. And again, got a job at the local David Lloyd Centre again, yeah, recouping some money that I was spending on tuition fees and accommodation. So lots of roles in tennis. So yeah, very grateful that I can give back to you guys today.
No, it's fascinating, and it's great that you've got such a breadth of experience, and all of those things that you've mentioned, I'm sure, are resonating with the parents who are listening, and some of whom have been mentioning on the group recently. They're looking for different ways for their children to get more involved in the sport and really benefit from all of the extra experiences and skills that you can learn through tennis other than just necessarily competing. Um, I think a lot of parents are also interested in where their children can go post tennis or post at least competitive tennis as a junior, and how they could perhaps stay in the sport and maybe make a career out of the sport in a different way. So perhaps you wouldn't mind sharing with us your sort of career, how you got to where you are to now in your working life.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of stick from mum, admittedly. Mum always wanted me to be a PE teacher. I wasn't so sure of smelly sports fields and the younger children. So I rebelled a little bit and but did have that interest in sports science. So I went off to university the first time, again, pretty local, just up into Yorkshire, and did sort of sports injury, sports rehab as a first degree. And as I said, doing my level 3, my coaching work, that got me my coaching badge. So then I did that for 9 years through my 20s till I got wind locally that Lincoln University were putting on a master's in physiotherapy, and was lucky enough to get a place on that. But yeah, that again is something I'm always keen to promote. Again, coming back sort of with my coach's hat on, you're always keen to promote players, and you want, again, players to get into the county teams and represent and kind of follow in your footsteps. But there's just so much more out there. We know about officials and refereeing, as well as coaching, of course. But then there are, of course, these sports science supports. So physios, strength and conditioning coaches, which is becoming more and more popular, sports psychologists. But I had a really nice, pertinent moment last year at Wimbledon when I was visiting, and I naturally put it on my social media that I was there having a great day on centre court. And I got one of my old parents of a girl I used to coach in my 20s saying, "Oh, my daughter is actually there working. You should give her a message and go and meet up." Probably won't be offended for me to say she wasn't the most, what's the word, involved maybe tennis player. She came and had a 30-minute lesson with me every week. But sure enough, she's got this career in tennis. Well, for that 2 weeks anyway, she was working there as a paramedic. So
Oh,
walking
wow.
with a big red bag to everyone's beck and call, medical, the audience, the spectators, as well as players and everyone as well. So it was great to see her there in a role I'd not even thought about too. So
That was a role that was kept very busy this year at Wimbledon. Well, last year at Wimbledon, wasn't it? With the heat, it was terrible. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, Faye. Thank you for explaining and sharing all that. I do think parents always want to know where their child might take the sport. I mean, with a lot of hobbies in childhood, it's very difficult to turn them into a career. But I think in sport, it's more and more opening up into all sorts of different areas that you mentioned. Thank you for that. So tonight we've got three main sections to what we're going to talk about, and please do put any questions you have in the chat if you're watching live. And we do encourage people to join in if they want to, but equally respect if they don't. So the first section is going to be about the role of the courtside physio in tennis. Then we're going to move on to talk about having an appointment with a physio and all the things that might involve. And then the final section, we're going to talk more about injury prevention. So first of all, Faye, could you tell us at what level of tennis tournaments physio would be available to players on site?
yeah, good question. Good question. I probably should have done more research for this. I can only talk about my experiences. So I came on board with the LTA about 3 years ago. Again, I was very fortunate to be working at Wimbledon at the time in the gyms as a recovery assistant, but met up with a guy I'm sure lots of people will know, Nigel Smethurst, who has done a lot of physio work for the LTA. So I got chatting with him at Roehampton. And yes, he has this bank of physios that he was doing adult events at the time as well. So I did a year of some 15Ks, but more in terms of juniors, which I've just done the last 2 years. I've done 14s nationals at Nottingham. So there's 2 physios, me and Nigel, and another lady called Laura, that cover that. I think we do the British schools as well at Nottingham. Being up in Lincoln, that's generally where I go. And yeah, the other nationals events, a little bit differently from the adult events. Some of those, like I say, the 15Ks, we did have one medic as well, so one doctor on site. Unfortunately, that's not the case at junior national, certainly at Nottingham, where I've been the last couple of years. So we had an interesting and busy couple of weeks last August. We're deemed still the primary first aider, so a few bits of judgment to be made on our part, going and treating some borderline medical needs as well, blisters, maybe mental health, breathing issues, cuts, grazes, things, ball in eye, and all of those nasty stuff. But yeah, typically the schools and nationals will have 2 physios covering.
And of course, you mentioned there the 15Ks, that's the ITF circuit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the physios are on site. Can you explain then what a medical timeout is from a physio's point of view? And I know this is going to be a really topical one, because anybody who was watching the men's semis where Zverev and Alcaraz were playing, and they got to the fifth set, the middle of the fifth set, and there was a medical timeout for Alcaraz, which was a little bit controversial, wasn't it, I hear?
Yes. So some strict rules, admittedly, for us. And yeah, if anyone's been at nationals, will see the process. I'm watching it on television. The player will talk to the chair umpire, who will then get on the radio to us. So we walk around the site with a radio saying, can we have a trainer to court? So we pop along for this medical issue. So we arrive.
Is it the chair umpire then that decides whether or not the player can call a physio?
Who decides if they can call a physio? Yes, I think so. The judgment, I guess, comes from us. So then we arrive and we get an unlimited amount of time to then assess the scenario, and this is where this is probably where the variation comes from, and the issue we've spoken about already. It's then for us to deem the extent, the severity, the type of the medical timeout that's going on. First, so we've got as much time as we need, essentially. Now, again, this is where it's quite conflicting and a hard job, because we all know about momentum in tennis and we don't want to slow the game down. So although we don't have a limited amount of time, we don't want to stop things down and stop play for too long. But yes, we need to assess matters and get to grips on the issue. And now that's not just about coming up with a diagnosis, but the second decision we have to make is, can indeed we do anything here and now to try and help this player? And that might be, yes, we could do some soft tissue work, some taping, or indeed it might be that we can't. And again, that then probably comes down to the player. Do they need to unfortunately retire and withdraw? But then amongst that, there are some strict rules, and the one that you're referring to being that we can't treat cramp, and so hence the scenario that we've had at the Aussie Open. So we have as much time as we need within limits to assess, but then the medical timeout is then that we get 3 minutes to, if we deem that there is some treatment we can do, 3 minutes to indeed deliver some treatment to that player.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously Zverev's view was that Alcaraz had cramp, but Alcaraz, I assume, is not going to tell the physio I've got cramp, because he's going to know that they're not going to get any treatment. And even if he didn't have cramp and it was exhibiting like cramp, it's almost an impossible scenario, isn't it? To stop somebody from using a medical timeout as a little bit of a chance to recover from something that's not actually medical. Can you explain a bit about why cramp isn't medical? Then?
Yeah, I suppose it comes back to what I was saying, in that we don't want to slow the game down, but we don't want sort of to encourage an opportunity for, unfortunately, gamesmanship to occur. Like we said, it's hard. It's an unknown quantity, a little bit cramp. We don't know enough about it. How much can we do? We've not got X-ray vision. Can we really say it is that? It isn't that? but sort of the ruling is officially it comes down to the cause of cramp is poor conditioning and poor preparation, and so it was preventable. So again, how much can we do? It's just going to affect the game too much.
Yeah, very, very tricky. I mean, even I've been at courtside where perhaps the child has got a blister on their hand, and you wonder, well, did they have any preparation? Did they keep their hands dry? Did they have blister plasters in their bag? And at what point you draw the line between saying, well, tough luck,
Yeah.
and I guess that goes right the way up through to the professional circuit as well.
Yeah.
One would hope they'd be better prepared with that sort of thing, but equally, cramp is one of those ones that you can't really treat it anyway, can you? You can't do anything for it other than what a player knows what to do anyway. So
Yeah, just stretch it out. It's probably along the lines of what we call a self-limiting condition. It's just going to follow the natural path that it's going to take. And yeah, maybe some stretching, some self-management from the player themselves can help it. And it will pass. But yeah, definitely a tricky one to face. Difficult conversations between all those involved, and yeah, and a bit of an unknown quantity.
so you mentioned then soft tissue massage and you mentioned taping. Is there any other treatments that you're allowed to give courtside? I mean, for example, do you prescribe medicine ever?
Yeah, really good question. And again, going back to the problem that I said in difference to the adult events when we have a medic on board, they are allowed to prescribe now. It's unfortunately not within our standard scope that physios can prescribe meds unless they've done additional courses. So no, we can't give out paracetamol, ibuprofen. It is just the taping, the mobilizations and manipulations, anything we can do if it is a tightness to ease it up, or any pain relieving factors just to moderate those nerve endings and try and help them through.
Yeah, I think it's always worth putting a couple of paracetamol maybe in a child's tennis bag, or ibuprofen. I know I once put a whole pack in, and one of my children took four ibuprofen. And as I stood and watched and wasn't able to intervene, they survived to tell this tale, of course. But yeah, I mean, I guess generally, if you put a couple of pills in a Tupperware box or something and say these are your emergency for if you're in pain, is that reasonable for a
Yeah.
parent to do?
And again, we'll maybe come on to this a bit later with one of the other questions, but it's kind of all in line with I've spent 3 years in the NHS as well, and it's just trying to follow their ethos, which is really helpful. Physios are becoming a little less what we call in line with passive treatments, the mobilizations, the massage, the taping, and more within active treatments. So a player self-managing themselves and knowing what to do themselves through education, telling them, this is the role of paracetamol, ibuprofen. Here's some tuber grip. You can put this on if your ankle feels a little bit dodgy. You could try this compression. There's some tape. This is a way you could manage it yourself with some tape. So yeah, in line with NHS fashions now in trying to just educate and coach players to manage it themselves on court.
You did touch there earlier on mental health issues, such as things like panic attacks or anxiety. I guess heat related stuff doesn't necessarily come under that, but can you be called on court to deal with mental health issues?
Yeah, again, it comes down to the physios and the difference between sort of competence and confidence of yourself and your own training. This is part of the reason I went into physio, is that we are getting so big with our scope and you can take it where you want. So yeah, depending on the physio and their strengths, if they feel comfortable to help that player, then they can do that. But it is well within our scope and sort of a key realm of ours in what we call respiratory techniques. So those to do with the lungs. I'd perhaps encourage the child to do some deep breathing techniques, some diaphragmatic breathing, some square breathing, some abdominal breathing, just to try and calm them down and just again coach and reassure and say this will pass. If you try these things, nothing will last forever.
I guess that's again a very fine line, isn't it? Because obviously the player on the other side of the net has been doing their utmost to unsettle their opponent. within the rules of tennis, of course, but nonetheless, if a child is having a panic attack, it could equally look like an asthma attack, couldn't it? It's quite a similar thing. So I guess it's always something that the physio has to make that decision about, is it? It must be difficult.
Yeah, yeah. Again, going back to the rulings, I meant to say earlier, so you get that 3 minutes medical timeout first. Now that is per one injury. So they have that three, if we deem it appropriate, they get that 3 minutes treatment, the break in play, that is a medical timeout. It is then within the rules that we can go again onto court further 2 times for that same injury and just use the changeover time. So that, what is it, 60 seconds at a changeover, 90 seconds at the end of the set. And we can carry on with some manual therapy if we, again, deem it helpful. But that is per one injury. So that's one medical timeout. You can technically have another medical timeout for a different problem. And that's where it probably gets a bit, what's the word, controversial. Again, without trying to be too biased myself, if a player was calling me on again for another injury, I'd be saying, is your body maybe telling you something here? Are you really fit to be playing this if you've got lots going on? But yeah, lots of decisions and judgments to be made.
What about treating somebody who's very obviously needing of a medical timeout, for example, if they had a fall and they're bleeding?
Yes, yeah. So that does get up to a 15-minute immediate stop in play to cover that bleeding. I think that happened to Raducanu, didn't it? When she won the US Open, she got that cut on her shin
Yes, on her leg, yeah.
So yeah, so that's an immediate stop. Yeah, up to 15 minutes. But yeah, absolutely no cramp. Again, I think this is where the controversy again came in this week, because I think Alcaraz was probably not arguing, but relaying the potential of the heat that's contributed. It's not just a physical physio problem; it's a medical problem as well. And his preparation probably didn't help because of the extreme heat as well, which has contributed to the spasm, to the cramps. So lots of fluffiness, I suppose, is the moral of the story.
Now, generally in tennis, there's always a bit of a debate over medical timeouts, aren't there? That because of all these things we're discussing. I'm assuming that you are a fan of medical timeouts.
Oh, don't know what to say to that one. I probably follow my practice with, like I said, being in line with sort of the NHS way, in that we are trying to take on more of a coaching role, and teach and educate our players how to deal with things themselves. I work a bit in private practice, but me and my colleagues joke that we are terrible private practitioners because our aim is that we like to get our clients in for maybe one visit for a full assessment, and then maybe get them in once more for a follow-up to see how they're going, but we don't want repeat business. And I suppose it's like that. I personally don't want to be seeing players again and again taking their money, because it's not cheap. Some of this care now, and with everything else you've got going on, coaching, accommodation, travel, it soon adds up. So if it answers your question, no, I don't like the medical timeouts because I don't want players to be relying on my services. Again, in line with the health system, I want players to be managing it themselves and not spending fortunes.
Yeah, you'd rather be seeing them and educating them in an appointment rather than dashing on to sort of be the hero every
Yeah.
match. Yeah, got it, got it. Okay. Anybody watching tonight want to ask any questions about that first section, all about the role of the courtside physio? If you do, then pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we will move on now to the next section. Which is all about having an appointment with a physio. We kind of got to that in our conversation anyway, didn't we, Faye? What should a parent expect? I mean, obviously, this is the tennis parents community. We're going to talk much more about children's tennis, junior tennis, and the relationship that the parent will have with the physio through that. So, what should a parent expect when they take their child to the physio?
Where should we start with this? Again, probably just to follow on what I've just said. First, for the first visit, just a good, thorough assessment. It might not look that or feel like you've had a lot of care, being taken. And again, this is where the role is probably changing from that traditional one of an hour's massage. You go for a physio for an hour's massage, more to what we're deeming holistic care. It's not, and that being, it's not just physical properties and causes of what brings players into our clinics, but there's wider social and psychological factors as well. So to get a real good grip on that player in front of us, we really like to take a thorough history now. So indeed, a good long chat to see the history, what's gone on before, what's led up to this, what other factors are at play, what are they struggling with, what helps things, because that then helps our care moving forward. And helps us come to the right diagnosis. Again, we're moving away from diagnosis, more to an overall impression of the player. But a good thorough history taking at that first appointment. And again, it'll probably feel like a long interview, but a good chat between both. It shouldn't be the physio dictating, right? Okay, we think this is now what you need, but more shared decision making between, I suppose, in this audience, the physio, the child, and the parent. Like I say, we shouldn't just be dictating what we think the child needs, but we want to hear what may have worked in the past for your child and build on that again if it's likely to succeed again. So
if I called up a physio for my child, then would I explain beforehand what I thought was wrong with them, or would I is that helpful?
Yeah, your child will know their body better than anyone. You as a parent will know your child better than anyone as well. So yeah, absolutely. Any information that you deem helpful for us, that tends to be how I wrap up a history taking. Is there anything else you think would be useful for me to know? All part of, like I say, that team approach.
I guess you have quite a big divide between people who walk in and know exactly what's wrong with them. Like, my ankle hurts, or someone who says, I just don't seem to be able to move my shoulders like I used to, or whatever, sort of quite more vague stuff. And I guess also a lot of children are playing a lot of different sports, aren't they? So they may well have got an injury that one of my children had an injury that hurt when they played tennis, but they actually got the injury from the gym. But because the floor in the gymnasium was, this is gym as in gymnastics, and because the floor was sprung in the gymnasium, they didn't actually feel the pain then, but they did feel it when they were playing tennis on a hard court. So I guess that's something that comes into these diagnoses, doesn't it? That what are the children doing, not just on a tennis court, but in life generally?
Exactly that. It's treating the person, treating the child in front of us, and not treating them as a diagnosis, as a hip flexor issue, as an Achilles. It's treating that person, and that's where, like I say, our care is now going. It's going away from what we've deemed passive treatments, like I say, maybe an hour's massage and manipulation, to some wider healthy habits that we should all be following. How much sleep are they getting? Sleep is the time where we and our body takes and does a lot of its recoup and rehab. Are they getting a good 8 hours sleep at night? Are they drinking the recommended 1.5 to 2 litres of water a day to flush their system thoroughly? So just a wider healthy habit taking, if that's the word.
I'm sure there's a lot of parents listening thinking, uh-oh, grab a glass of water quick. And we'll try and get some sleep tonight. Let's move on a little bit to talk about common tennis related reasons for booking an appointment with a physio for junior players. So what sort of tennis injuries are you seeing? What are the ones where a physio can really help as well?
I guess thinking back to nationals last year, I saw a lot of heel pains, a lot of foot pains. If again we're talking about children, there is something very common in sort of 8 to 12-year-olds called Sever's disease. It sounds very serious, but it is an inflammation of a growth plate underneath the heel. So I saw a lot of heel pains. In terms of prevalence, in terms of where the research is going, the serve, in terms of movements, the serve is probably the most commonly performed technique and shot in tennis. So some care around the shoulder and the lower back as well to achieve that full extension. So the peripheral joints, probably shoulder, elbow, ankles and knees, probably for a starting point.
Okay, and perhaps you could explain then to us what overuse injuries are.
Yeah, so two types of injuries. And again, this is why taking that, what we call that history, taking that interview at the start of your physio appointment is really helpful. That's probably the first question I'm asking in my head. Is this what we call a traumatic injury, where there has been a specific incident which has caused this? Or has it been what we call a non-traumatic injury? Has it come on over a long period of time? And that's more the overuse type injuries, because that helps my sort of mind compartmentalize. Okay, if it's an acute injury that came on with a shot, with an overreach, has something torn, has something sprained, has something strained, versus, like I say, these more grumbly, longer onset, what you deem the overuse type injuries that have come on over a longer period of time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just thinking about one of my children in adulthood returned to netball and snapped their Achilles. And I guess that is a traumatic injury, but it's still a consequence, perhaps,
Yeah.
of not warming up on a very cold night, not having played sport for a while. I mean, I'm not trying to blame the player, don't get me wrong, but you know, there's a lot of things around something like that as a traumatic injury. So sometimes even a traumatic injury, although it needs that. Um, Intervention there and then, it can still need a lot of rehab to put right the reasons it happened in the first place. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I'll probably build on some points from your previous talks. And I think some of the questions you've got in tonight, where I want to work in a team, and it's not just my input, but where and why strength and conditioning is becoming really popular and really useful as well. So some conditioning and strengthening of the ankle joint and the Achilles complex, the calf complex around it to, yeah, like you say, avoid, try and prevent that overstretch.
And I
And
suppose that also leads on to thinking if you see a child that's got a certain type of pain, you might know where that's going to lead in terms of a traumatic injury. And if you can nip it in the bud, and perhaps a parent can take their child to see a physio earlier rather than ending up in A&E with the full-blown
yeah.
consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's probably the value of teamwork. It would be nice to know from the coach. It'd be good to hear the coach having maybe noticed some changes in form. And then we can bring them into our physio clinic, and we'll typically look at length of muscles and tissues and strength of muscles and tissues. So then we might indeed find a weakness or a shortcoming, and then we can feed that information potentially into the strength and conditioning coach. Say we found this weakness in the calf complex, we've given them these exercises as a starting point. Here you go, and you can now work on a rehab plan to strengthen condition your player. So a team
Brilliant.
approach.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And this is why the information is so important and comes back again to one of the things we love to talk about, which is how important the parents' role is in tennis, because the coach isn't necessarily, until they're at quite a high level, going to be the one explaining what's wrong with somebody who can't necessarily articulate it for themselves. So the parent, again, is playing this amazingly triangular role and very important role in tennis that perhaps is much bigger than in other sports, where perhaps there's a team physio or something in football. I don't know, but you know, it's very much a solo sport and an interesting one. Now, a parent, and we do, when people register to attend our Q&As, we do ask them to put questions in advance if they'd like to, and we also give them the opportunity to remain anonymous, because not every parent wants to be identified. They don't necessarily want their child identified. So in this case, this is a question a parent's asked me to ask you, Faye. Is there a way of to tell if you're dealing with growing pains or an injury? For example, when a child says their knee hurts, how can a parent tell whether that's just something that's a normal growing pain or actually an injury?
Yeah, it is very tricky, even tricky for us still. And so this again goes back to my prior point, hopefully, in that it comes back to a good, thorough assessment and conversation with a physiotherapist. We'll get 90% of our information from that initial conversation. The bit where we then examine, we are just merely confirming our hypothesis. But a lot of what we see, there are what we call sort of patterns, pattern recognition, and key demographics that injuries follow. Like I said, that Sever's disease is typical in sort of 8 to 12-year-olds. So growing pains tends to be more of an ache in nature rather than a sharp stabbing. They tend to be more muscular than joint related. So they might be pointing and holding maybe their calf muscle rather than their knee. And they typically tend to get worse as the day goes on. So it'll be typically worse at night when they've maybe been on their feet all day. So they tend to be more lower limb and more achy. But yeah, it's really hard to tell.
So if something's perhaps hurting all the time rather than coming and going.
Yeah, all day. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
probably something else going on in a different cause. Yeah.
Now we talked a little bit about trauma injuries, and sometimes it's very obvious when you just need to go to A&E. But there are times when I know I've wondered, should I go and see a doctor with my child about this? Should I perhaps pop to A&E, or should I go and see a pharmacist even? We're encouraged to do that these days, or 111, or even another health professional, or simply a sports masseur. Can you give us any advice as parents as to what
Mm.
experts can all offer that's different and which you would recommend?
Yeah, it probably again comes down to that education aspect from us, and well, that's hopefully what I've come online to do tonight. But it depends on the role and the input and the care that you're after for your child. Like we've said, medicines, paracetamol, ibuprofen, prescriptions are not within our scope as physios. So if it is a more medical issue, you want maybe a short course of treatment, it's an allergy, you need some antihistamines, you go to a doctor. A sports masseur is more for that regular conditioning. If I say if you've got the resource for it and the time and the money for it, just to keep on top of things, preventative, that would be your sports masseuse. Your physio would be for more a pinpointed bodily physiological weakness, let's say, that you want fully explored and a full assessment of that joint or muscle unit. Yeah, does that help?
Yeah,
Depends on care you're after.
yes, yes. No, that's definitely interesting. In fact, that leads on very nicely to a question another parent has put in to when they registered about sports massage for juniors, particularly. Is it needed? Is it worth it? Or is it better to have a good strength and conditioning program? And that person's asked about the sort of short versus long-term interventions.
Yeah, I'm pleased you kind of ended with that statement. I'm trying not to be biased and trying to sit on the fence. I am. There are lots of biases amongst physios. There seems to be a camp where there are physios that are very much in this forward-thinking way that we want to coach, we want to educate, we want to reassure. Um, they get berated a little bit, especially NHS physios. I'm sure it's not an elephant in the room where a lot of patients are going to physios and getting a sheet of exercises. Um, and admittedly, that's not where we do want to be. There should be more going into it than that. But then there is this camp of physios who will get hands on and will do lots of manual treatment, but that's got its downfalls as well, because those more passive treatments, as you've just alluded to, they are just more for short-term benefits, short-term windows of opportunities to get into exercise. So there is a little bit of debate going on amongst the physio world at the minute that we probably need to sort out. But yeah, in terms of, I try to sit on the fence in that. I like I say, I do feel that we get a window of opportunity through a little bit of hands-on work. If it just gives indeed just a 10-minute window for me to show you, yes, you can now do that calf raise to contract your calf and your Achilles. I'll do a little bit myself of massage, and now you can do your exercises indeed on this sheet as I've given you. Let's do them together. Now you can go and do that. So I'm trying to sit on the fence myself. But to go back to your question in terms of massage, again, it comes down to your individual circumstances. I appreciate it can get very costly and time consuming to be going for a massage every week. So indeed, if that is how you're weighing it up against a strength and conditioning session, I would definitely advocate the S&C, because the exercise rehab, that conditioning, that's going to give you the longer term effects versus a massage. Again, going back to some of those reasons we spoke about earlier, the child and yourself as a parent maybe can self-manage that exercise plan yourself at home without having to come back and see me as a physio and do it with you. If a good physio shouldn't just give you that sheet of exercises, they should be teaching you, educating you. This is the correct form to say, do that heel raise. So you've got no queries, but indeed you might go back for a follow-up with that physio to make sure the form is there. But yes, I don't want players really relying on any service regularly. So yeah, something they can self-manage themselves, like S&C, again, after a good assessment, and doing that rehab plan at home. There has been like foam rollers. Have you seen like these foam rollers that you can get in the gyms? Well, you can buy them on Amazon again at home. Again, a little bit controversial. Can we really pummel and get the depth of sort of length and stretch to replicate massage ourselves with this foam roller? But the beauty of it is, you know, £20 on Amazon, you've got this foam roller, you can potentially deliver a little bit of massage yourself at home, again, without paying £60 or whatever to go and get a massage every week. So something that you can self-manage yourselves at home with your child would be something that I would advocate.
I think what you're really saying is that cost. We're looking at cost benefit of these
Yeah.
things. You know, if you're in a fortunate position to be able to afford it, it's all very nice, isn't it? But ultimately, strength and conditioning is very much now a part of being a tennis player. And I heard an expression once that you should approach your rehab as you would your training is if you were playing. And you know, we're all very keen to work hard in the gym and work hard on the court when we're training. So we need to work hard with rehab as well. And we've seen a lot of I've seen a lot on Instagram with players who are rehabbing, showing all the work they're doing, and I think they're great role models for children. But yeah, we always in the past, I think we went to see a physio. We kind of wanted treatment. We wanted to be put right, and we don't really want homework, but that's really key, isn't it? From what I'm gathering, that from what you're saying.
Want to get the long-term benefits is, yeah, putting in that homework, that exercise plan, that massage, even taping. I think taping's been proven to, you know, wrap an ankle prior to a match to try and stop it rolling. But the research has shown the effects of that barely last 10 minutes into a match. So again, why are we spending so much time and effort and resource buying all this tape, all this time into strapping up an ankle when it's only going to help them for the first 5 or 10 minutes of a match? So
What happens after that? Is it just not effective?
slackens off, yeah, just slackens off and doesn't give that support.
Hold, yeah.
Uh,
Right. That's interesting. What about girls and boys? Do they have the same sorts of injuries? Do you see the same? I mean, what age does that start to change if it does?
yeah, no, different. Like I said, a lot of the demographics dictate different injuries for each gender. Yeah, the Sever's disease tends to hit the heel pain boys a little bit more. Again, to go to another sport, if I may, with football, we're seeing a lot of ACL knee injuries in female footballers because our makeup is a little bit different. We have wider hips as girls for naturally bearing children and giving birth, and that then widens the angles of between our femur, our leg bone, and our knee. So puts the ACL under a little bit more pressure. Again, at the knee, there's something called Osgood Schlatters, so a little bump at the front of your knee, which tends to hit boys a little bit more. Again, that's another growth-related condition that they will grow out of. But yeah, different things for different demographics for sure.
In fact, I took a course with the LTA recently as a bit of a guest coming along, but it was about coaching females. And there's an online version, and there's also a CPD course that coaches can take. And I'd really recommend any parent of a female tennis player has a chat with their coach about trying to go on the course, because they did go through some amazing differences. That there's been a lot of research in tennis about the differences in the female body and how technical ways of playing the sport need to be looked at in a different way, or at least if females are playing in what they call, say, for example, the ATP forehand, which is where the contact point's a long way away from the body. And female players, you'll see pro players hitting with female players with a bent arm because they want the centre of, well, I'm not technical, but I won't try and explain that, but that's basically the difference. So the WTA forehand being here and the ATP being the extended arm. If females are going to play with an extended arm, they then need to have a different type of strength and conditioning to counter that. So I think the LTA are actually going to produce a parents' version of this content as well, so that parents can upskill themselves about the differences between female tennis players and male tennis players. So do watch out for that, everybody. I think it's really good information, really well researched. Let's talk a bit about players playing through pain. I had a question from a parent on this as well, and Nikki didn't mind me mentioning her name, Nikki Leach. She's asked for tendon injuries, for example, tennis elbow, as well as stretches, and I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, am I? Eccentric, is it? Eccentric.
Yeah.
Would you suggest playing through the pain? And I know, generally as well, if we could ask not just about tennis elbow, but what sorts of injuries can you play through the pain?
Yeah, more and more we're finding now. Yeah, again, I'll probably liken it to the NHS ways. I'm sure we've maybe got friends and relatives that have had joint replacements, knee, hip replacements, and we're kind of following that ethos where they're having that hip replacement. We're trying to get them up and mobilizing on day zero because we're finding, the longer you're bedridden, the more you're going to end up with contractures, and the more it's going to set you back. And indeed, that is following the pattern with other soft tissues as well. Predominantly tendons, that's where a lot of the research has gone, because we're finding that whole contractile unit, it's a balancing act. It's essentially a capacity versus demand issue, an imbalance. A tendinopathy comes about because we're maybe asking this much of the body, and again it comes back to conditioning. This seems a key point for us tonight. The body is only capable and has capacity for this much loading, and that's then why that pain comes about. Again, pain is a warning system. It's saying something's out of kilter. Please do something about this now, otherwise something bad might happen. So again, it's a bit of trial and error and a little bit of education and working together between the physio and the player. But yes, we are predominantly moving away from a model where we would just be immediately rest and calm things down. I mean, you can do that, but that's no fun. We want to get back to function and get back to what we enjoy as quick as possible. So the best way to bring them back into equilibrium is to heighten that capacity. And so again, it comes back to that strength and conditioning. So indeed, yes, we are promoting lots of more strengthening exercises at the elbow. To take tennis elbow as the example, at the elbow and the wrist, tennis elbow is actually a wrist problem. So lots of wrist curls to get that capability higher and matching the demands that we are indeed asking of it. But it is a tricky place to navigate, because we can, as I said, pain is a warning system. It can be that we maybe push it too much and then end up with a tear. So I like a cliche, and a cliche I use a lot in clinic is this pain warning system, traffic light system. I've taken it from a very good physio that's out there in the world. And another way we try, it's very hard, but we try to quantify things, is a 0 to 10 scale. So 10 being very painful or limiting us a lot, and 0 being none. And we are finding more and more now that you are safe too. If the child was to quantify what they're feeling, they can actually work up to and through maybe a 3 or a 4 out of 10. Again, if 10 is excruciating pain, 0 is none, 3 somewhere about a third of the way, just below 50% pain. They are to work through that, because that then achieves the key principle of overload. We have to overload tissues to, again, increase that capacity versus demand and get that back in equilibrium. We need to overload tissues to make strength gains. So yes, we do need to work through a little bit of more discomfort, I would describe it, than pain.
And I would assume that having a diagnosis is really important before we make any decision about that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely. It comes back to that initial assessment taking time. to have that conversation and come to the bottom of what are the factors that have contributed to why this player is here now.
And also listening to the child, as I famously didn't do when my son's foot collapsed. But he was actually recovered and sent back on court, and then it re-collapsed. And I told him, yeah, he needed to live with the pain a bit and grow up. And then it was X-rayed and it had re-collapsed. So that wasn't very exciting. And then I told him a big lesson in life is not always to listen to other people and trust your own instincts, because obviously I did have at least the sense to take him to see a professional. But yeah, I personally did think he was kind of moaning a bit about it when he shouldn't have been, but turns out that wasn't the case. So yeah, I guess some kids are very stoic, and what they call a little bit of pain is not
Yeah.
necessarily what
Yeah.
we call, what I might call an awful lot. So yeah, listen to your children sometimes as well, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. Same with adults. It's got its challenges, that 0 to 10 system, but it's the best thing we can come up with at the minute. So maybe encourage that with your children. Ask them to try and quantify it as best as they can.
And you've already briefly touched on strapping, Faye. Can we just cover that one again? When is it actually effective to strap something? I know you said it doesn't work when you're on court. Can players or parents apply their own strapping? I mean, there's lots of stuff on YouTube, isn't there? You could watch how to strap something. And how often, if you do something like that, should you be changing the strapping?
So there's two main types of tape, I suppose, and again, it comes back to what you want to achieve. The historical one are these white zinc tapes, zinc oxide tapes, and that's traditionally when they're very rigid, and that's when we want to lock something in. My primary example of that being, like, say, an ankle, an ankle that's prone to rolling, a la Andy Murray. You can use this white zinc taping to lock it in to try and give it a bit of stability and stop those ankle sprains. So that's maybe the white tapes that you'll see. But over the last, I don't know where we're at now, maybe 40 years over from Japan, we've had this kinesio taping, and this is the colourful tapes that, like, Djokovic has up his back, the pink, the blues, some Union Jacks. I think we even had at the Olympics, some funny designs, and they're more singular strips, can be in patterns next to each other, but they're actually the opposite. They have elastic properties, and they work more with the soft tissues and work in what we call convolutions with the contraction of muscles, just to give a little bit of a hug, really, and a little bit of support to more muscular units. So yes, depends. Again, I'm going to reiterate, a good assessment with a physio, see what the problem is. Is it more joint related? Is it more soft tissue muscular related? And that will determine what tape you wish to go with. Again, the same with what I was saying earlier, there's a lot of controversy with this because the effects don't tend to last. And even with the kinesio tapes, the elastic tapes, can really a piece of tape sat on top of the skin infiltrate deep to the tissues and influence what's going on? We're not really sure, but I'm just honest with my players and parents and just say we don't really know how it works, but we are finding it works. I think it works via different mechanisms rather than getting better contractions. It just sends nice signals to the brain. Like I said, it's more of a physical hug. You bang your elbow on the wall. What's the first thing you do? You just want to give it a little rub. You just want to like I say, give it a hug. So again, I try to be quite open-minded, but I'm honest with parents and players. It might help, it might not, but I think it's something worth trying. But again, going back to my other ethos, I quite like taping because, again, I will spend a good amount of time in that assessment if I deem it appropriate, to teach parents and children to be able to do it themselves. So again, they're not reliant on me, and they're not reliant on going into a physio clinic long term to get it redressed. The white tapes, they don't, as I say, last very long at all. I would take them off after every match. I probably would with the kinesio tapes as well. The makers say that they can last a little bit longer, a week or more. But yeah, I'd probably they're about £6 for a reel on Amazon. So yeah, I'd maybe readdress both after a match. But again, going back to Andy Murray as an example, he he moved more to the braces, didn't he, with both of his ankles after rolling around at Queen's, unfortunately. So there's other alternatives, given the challenges of those white tapes. Maybe a brace would be another option as well.
Really interesting what you said then about is it kinesthetic tape? Is that the right word? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I always feel, whenever I've had that applied at a physio, I think the longer it can last the way the physio did, the better. And of course, it's waterproof. And so you can have a shower, you can leave it on for several days. But is that actually not as effective as peeling it off and doing your own version of it?
No, no. As you say, there's lots of educational tools on YouTube. And yeah, I would be asking my physio, can you show me? Or if you can't, if it is a lower back thing, I'd be getting a relative in. I always invite in if a patient comes with their significant other or their parent, get them in as well, get them involved in care too, and teach them, or at least take a video or a picture on their phones and yeah, educate them to be able to manage it themselves.
And replace it more frequently, perhaps, is better than, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's talk a bit about ibuprofen gel and deep heat and cold sprays. These are all the things that we like to put in our tennis bags, and we're never really sure if they work, why they work, or whether we're just sort of, like you say, giving ourselves a mental hug. What are those three things for? When should we use them?
Yes, so this is another good point I wanted to reiterate tonight, if I may. This is where research is changing too, in terms of these what we call acute care for first line care guidelines. I'm sure everybody might be familiar with the Price or Rice guidelines, which we used to say, you've rolled your ankle, you've got this swelling. The first things to do is each of those letters. So we protect, we rest, we ice, we compress, we elevate. That was around for a long time. And then again, maybe 15, 20 years ago, that changed a little bit in line with, again, what we've spoken about with tendons. We got rid of the R for rest and we changed it to police. So everything the same, but we changed rest to optimal loading because, again, we're saying we don't want to completely decondition tissues. We want to keep pressing them as much as pain allows. So that's where we went with that. Ice still remained. But now, in the last couple of years, a good paper came out in the British Journal of Sports Medicine where we've changed it again. And now we promote this acronym called Peace and Love. And I think you might have a screenshot that you might be able to help me with, Kay, if that's all right.
Yeah, let me see if I can be very technically clever here and get that to show.
While you do that, I'll just talk again around the brief. We've kept out the rest. The Royal these guys from Australia have again kept out the rest. We still want to optimally load, so load a tissue as much as we are able, again, using that pain scale, more a discomfort than a pain, maybe up to a 3 or a 4, but we've got rid of ice. Traditionally, the thought was an injury has occurred, it's swollen up, there's all this heat and inflammation, we want to cool it down. So we want to bring in some cold pack to cold compress, some ice. Then as we get through, that's what we call the acute phase. That typically takes maybe 2 or 3 days after an injury. We then enter the subacute phase. We want to, again, get everything going again. So then we might start stretching, start moving, and that's when we would bring in help to raise the heat, to help raise the temperature and help that contractibility of tissues. So it was in line with timeframes after that initial injury, really. Ice at first, and then heat to help things get going. But again, in line with what Kay's kindly put on the screen now, we've moved away from Price to police to this Peace and Love acronym, and it's got no ice or heat in there at all. Because the Royal research is finding that, again, like the debate we had with massage and with taping, can we really get the effects of that ice and heat to infiltrate deep into the tissues like we want it to? And the chances are we probably can't. It's probably working via different mechanisms, sending different messages to our brain to give us a different type of hug, as we said. So my advice now, typically to patients is in line with, again, interestingly, that A for avoid anti-inflammatories. So we are now saying don't take any ibuprofen in those first 2 to 3 days, because in fact, we don't want ice. We don't want to cool that swelling. That is all part of a natural healing process. we need that to take place before anything else can happen. So let's do let the body do what it does best, take care of itself, and just let these natural mechanisms take play. So we're going to actually avoid ibuprofen in the first few days and avoid any ice or heat. And then after that, we can move into some exercises and some loading. Does that make any sense?
That makes a lot of sense, and I love the acronym. Great. We're full of acronyms in tennis. It's nice to have one that sort of makes you feel positive. Okay, well, I'll stop sharing that for a moment, and then I'm just going to see whether there's somebody on the call tonight who's put a question in the chat. Would the person like to ask the question themselves, or would they like me to? By all means, come off mute if you wish to. If you don't, I'll happily ask the question for you. So the attendees asked, how common are frozen shoulders in the tennis world? Although mine improved following capsular release surgery, this condition is now into the third year. And with it being my dominant arm, I'm conscious that tennis could have been the reason for this. Is this something you come across, and how, and can it be avoided? And if so, how?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to be very helpful to you, Stephen. No, I'm sorry. Yes, used to see it a lot in my NHS clinics. Again, it follows key demographics. And admittedly, that is less so with children. It is more a middle-aged, more females, interestingly, than males. But yeah, middle-aged woman typically, but that doesn't mean it's just limited to those. Interestingly, those with diabetes and thyroid problems tend to get it as well. So again, it comes down to a good dig into past medical history and demographics and chat with that patient. But the other thing about frozen shoulders is, again, to go back to a term I used earlier in the call, it's something that we deem self-limiting. So it is something that we don't really know a lot about. But what we do know is that it will just, a bit like that first phase of healing, it tends to typically just follow the path that it wants to take. And it can be up to anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, but it will always get better. I think you've just been an unlucky one, unfortunately, and having it several times. But no, it won't be linked to tennis. There'll be lots of, these things tend to be, again, what we call multifactorial, so lots of things potentially contributing to it. But yeah, don't worry, keep playing tennis as you are able.
What about a steroid injection?
Yes, if caught early enough, steroid injections can help, but yeah, it has to be early stages. Again, we practice is changing. We would have spent a lot of time doing lots of manipulations and really trying to work there. Typically, they are, like the name says, frozen, and they don't achieve a lot of rotation at the shoulder. And we would have probably as little as 10 years ago spent a lot of time pushing it and causing lots of pain. It was quite a painful condition to treat, but we're moving away from that now, again, because of this, what I call self-limiting nature of it. It will get better. It will follow its natural path. It just unfortunately needs time.
It's interesting, isn't it? A lot of these things, you have to look at what the outcome is, don't you? And for example, one of my children snapped their Achilles, as I mentioned earlier, and there was a debate over whether an operation was worthwhile because of the cost benefit of leaving the body to heal naturally versus having a scar that has to then heal. And we seem to be moving on in leaps and bounds with the sort of outcomes. And even I gather that there's different ways internationally that these things are dealt with. So in America, for example, I think they would always operate, whereas in the UK now, the thinking is not to. So that, you know, this is all opinion, isn't it? Still based hopefully on lots of research, but also experiential stuff.
Yeah. ACLs at the knees, we are moving away from going straight in and repairing those to just getting on with some good rehab, because indeed we are finding, is it in fact the surgery that's helped, or is it just the fact that they've had 6 months of being immobilized where every bodily system, the mind, everything can calm down. We can have some time off the stresses of work, of caring for family members, to just calm our whole body down and then build it gradually back up again. So yeah, it's probably alternative mechanisms to what we potentially initially thought as to how it works.
Well, brilliant. That's been fascinating. I think it's time we moved on to our final section, Faye, because the time always rushes by. I can never believe we've been chatting for over an hour already. But this final section is about injury prevention, and we've already touched on it quite a lot, in fact. A parent, Jess, has asked me to ask you how tennis fitness is evolving.
Yeah, tricky one. But I would probably just have to play it, back it off into another corner and say it depends on the demands of tennis and is related to and dictated to by the way that tennis is moving. And that being the different court surfaces, we're having longer rallies, more baseline play, so probably more endurance type factors, aerobic endurance and muscular endurance to last through those longer baseline rallies. But again, to reiterate what I've said already, we're becoming more holistic, more wider focused, and Djokovic is definitely onto something with these wider bodily systems that he's training through his breathing exercises, through his Pilates stretching, and through his agility work. So multi-system work probably within that as well.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's different pro players playing with quite different styles of play that counter the consequences of that, for example, might mean a very different strength and conditioning approach. I don't know whether tennis is becoming more homogenized in terms of how we play the sport, or whether there's still more difference. Certainly, lots of difference between a doubles player and a singles player, for example. But also lots of different physical shapes of tennis players. And we look at the Nadal forehand, and it's
Yes.
such a different thing when we first saw it, and then obviously the single-handed backhand, which has almost been retired out of the sport now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And yet Federer did very nicely out of it. So I guess strength and conditioning and fitness does have to consider playing style as well.
So it comes back to again a point I'm trying to probably reiterate too much in that it comes back to a good thorough assessment with a physio or a strength and conditioning coach to take into account playing styles, technique, how they want to play, where they want to go with the game, and yeah, assess for any weaknesses and any shortcomings with the tissues and work on that. There isn't. People are probably wanting a one size fits all answer to this question, but unfortunately, there isn't one. It's going to look differently for every different player, but that's okay. Again, in physio clinics, we used to be very worried about asymmetries and shoulders being here, hips not being level, all of these kind of things, but there is no normal for all of the hips that aren't level that we see in clinic. There'll be tons and tons of uneven hips or leg length discrepancies that are pain-free. So how does that work? How come they're coping absolutely fine? And it's for that reason there is no normal. So yeah, a good assessment in light of what's going on for the child and work from that.
And of course, when a child's growing, they can change themselves, can't they? It's not even one solution for each individual. It's also one solution for each individual at each what's the expression? Age and stage. I love that one.
Yeah.
And another parent's asked how to look after dyspraxic child's physio well-being. A child's got dyspraxia. Is there any tips you can give around that condition? I think it's a condition. I hope I'm not using the wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, admittedly, probably learning difficulties, disabilities, not so much in my remit and my competence and confidence. But again, I just reiterate a point I've tried to make through this call in just like you would pick a coach and select a coach that you have a good rapport with, I would do the same with a physio, find a physio, go through recommended physios maybe that are also in the area that peers have visited. It's going to be in the delivery, we're all going to hopefully assess all the patients as physios that we see in front of us in the same way, but the way we deliver our information is probably going to be different. We all have our own preferences, so the art would be in the communication, the rapport building, and who you select to work with your child. So Yeah, nothing technical I can really advise in terms of that, but do say take some time in picking out somebody to work well with your child.
No, I would totally agree with you there, and particularly make sure you've got the right coach as well, like you said, Faye. I think that's a very important part of the team, isn't it, around a child that needs extra care.
Yeah.
Um, Parents asked, which injuries do you see that are caused by purely poor technique rather than physiological challenges? I mean, we all talk about, or we hear about players who have been injured by the method in which they're serving, for example. Do you see people who you think, gosh, you've been taught to do that the wrong way?
Not probably not so much children, but certainly adults. A bit of a flat sort of forehand and backhand ground stroke where they've not got the nice natural deceleration and follow through over the shoulder. I've seen a few tennis elbows come out as a result of that because it's been purely from a singular elbow flexion and extension type movement, not bringing in the whole kinetic chain of the shoulder, of the hips and the trunk as well to get that nice follow through. So yeah, maybe a little bit looking at ground strokes forehands, and yeah, nice follow through to try and prevent tennis elbows a little bit in adults.
Hopefully, the way we're training coaches, and particularly in Britain now, the level courses have changed beyond belief since I would have taken them if I had ever. But since I was a child, tennis coaches now much more professionalised as a profession. I would hope that most quite au fait with the correct techniques, and those techniques are connected to being in line with injury prevention. But then again, we do see so many of the pros getting injured still, don't we? And whether that's because tennis ball weight changes from to tournament and playing on different surfaces, and it's more the conditions even than the technique or the physiological challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And and other parents asked, what are the most effective exercises that prevent and or manage shoulder and back injuries in teenage performance players?
Um, it's probably not specific to shoulders and backs, but there is a growing body of evidence that's actually moving away from stretching exercises to just performing strengthening type exercises. So, as I said, amongst the main things that we look at and trying to measure in physio clinic is the length of tissues. So, we will try and move a joint through as much range of motion as it will go through to get the length. And then we will try to push and resist, get a limb to push and resist against us to try and get an idea of the strength of some tissues and around a joint in a particular way. And there is some research saying not to worry too much about spending lots of time on stretching and just get to, if there's some weakness or some shortening at a joint, just get straight onto stability and strengthening work, because you're still going to achieve the same factors and same principles through strengthening exercises. You're pushing, you're pulling your dumbbell stuff, your weight work. You're still going to get a lengthening of the tissues like you wanted to achieve through stretching, through doing strength exercises. So yeah, weights, and also moving away from singular sort of planar joint movements. So a bicep curl being, one of the most common exercises you'd see at a gym maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago. We're moving away from isolating joint movements as well. And we're trying to achieve something that we call trying to be more functional. Because if we're reaching a high cupboard or if we are performing a tennis serve, we don't just perform elbow flexion like a bicep curl. There's several joints at our shoulder, our elbow, and our wrist that help us reach up to perform a tennis serve. So that's why we are moving more to, like I say, these functional movements where we're actually training several joints with one exercise. So and it relates to the activity that we want to get to. So push, pull, lifting would be a really good example for the shoulder, if that answers the question at all. So strength work, multiple joints with one exercise is a nice way to go.
What I'm thinking about as you're saying that is that really getting a strength and conditioning coach who knows tennis is actually quite important, isn't it? If that's what your child is going to playing most of, then the physio's got, sorry, the strength and conditioning coach has got to know.
The demands, yeah, of what we want to put them through and what they're going to face when they go out training or into a match. Yeah, absolutely.
Parents asked if you've got any suggestions for girls with hypermobility, particularly warm up, cool down, or daily exercises.
Yeah, and it's a similar realm with that as well. It depends, again, where I would go and get a thorough assessment to see where exactly the child is struggling. Are they particularly struggling at their hips, at their knees, are their ankles rolling? But again, in that same realm, I would promote lots of strengthening work, lots of lifting work, weights work, to promote as much stability and strength in those joints as possible.
And Stephen has asked for some top tips for strength and conditioning, particularly for a 12-year-old girl. Is there anything you could zero in on for that?
Uh, yeah, I'm probably going to avoid that question if I may. On the realm of what I was saying earlier, there's no one size fits all. It depends what is the child struggling with. Are they particularly struggling with a particular shot or movement pattern? Go and get a good assessment with a physio or strength and conditioning coach, and they'll be able to see if there's any weaknesses and imbalances in the game and give the right exercises. There isn't a one size fits all, unfortunately.
I guess, especially with girls at that age, you don't know what level of maturation they might be at, which means that their bodies are changing quite significantly, aren't they, around that time?
Yeah, puberty. I only learnt recently as well. Puberty starts at 8, so the body is changing. That's a lot earlier than I even thought. So, body is, yeah, undergoing lots of change from that age through the teens.
Like till they hit the menopause. So another parent, Aga Marchuak. I'm so sorry. I'll try that again. Marchuka. Aga Marchuka has asked me to ask you, which movement patterns or loads do you see causing the most preventable injuries in junior tennis players? So that's more about perhaps the footwork and that sort of movement. I know you talked about the kinesthetic energy going through the body and using the legs and so forth.
Hmm. What? Just repeat the question for me. Sorry, Kate.
Sure.
What?
Which movement patterns or loads do you see causing the most preventable injuries in junior tennis players?
Hmm. I, if we're thinking about strength and conditioning and homework again and exercise planning, I'd probably do, like we're kind of reiterating, sports of specific on court agility, lateral movement type drills, because again, that's going to load up the lower body, get some good knee bends, reaching down low, touching lines to then push up, stabilize the ankle, that calf complex to then push up, and yeah, mimic some backhand ground strokes. Yeah, it's just breaking down what we want to get back to. So that being a tennis match, trying to break that down into smaller, manageable chunks, just some lateral movements, just some forwards and back movements, just addressing it in a graded way, I suppose, a more manageable way to then build up into the match play.
No, I think we've covered quite a lot of different aspects that touch on answering that question already, haven't we? So thank you for having a go at that one. Another parent's asked if they could hear how best to prevent or manage stitch and then delayed onset muscle soreness, or what's commonly known as DOMS.
A stitch, that's probably going to be a learning point for me. I'm not entirely sure myself. Um, just because, again, going back to some of these early things we're talking to, it's a bit of an unknown quantity, a bit of an unknown entity. I wonder if it comes back to, again, those wider healthy habits, having a good diet, a good salt intake, so your electrolytes, a good protein intake, good fruit and veg, 5 a day is still a good rule to follow. Good water intake, as I said, daily recommendations for hydration is 1.5 to 2 litres of water a day. Yeah, just healthy habits in what we consume. Don't think there's anything particularly focused on stitches. I don't even think we really even know what causes a stitch and why it comes about. Um,
And
and
managing it when it comes, anything? Don't know.
no, I think it's probably again similar to these other things we've mentioned about. It's got that self-limiting identity. It will just come, it will play its own course, and it will pass with time. The body is more robust and resilient than what we've previously given it credit for. It knows how to help itself and heal itself, as I say, with a good 8 hours of sleep at night, for example. The body will help itself as much as it needs to in time. Again, this is why we as physios are perhaps moving away from these passive modalities, the massage and things, because the body can do a lot of this itself. We are there to educate, to reassure, to help patients self-manage themselves, because time, it will, a lot of this stuff, well, I probably shouldn't say this, a lot of this stuff will get better in time on its own. And then DOMS as well. I'll take back to sort of the peace and love protocol. It's not a nice, obviously, it's a normal bodily occurrence. It's just one of those things, unfortunately, we kind of have to go through in line with that principle of overload. You've overloaded your tissues. Every time we work out, we're essentially breaking down muscle fibers and relaying them with stronger ones. So that's quite a mechanism, really. So there is unfortunately going to be some pain with that, but it should settle within 24 to 48 hours. Again, I would just probably promote those healthy habits, the good sleep, the good hydration, and the good food intake.
It's an interesting one, Dom's, isn't it? I mean, obviously in the name, delayed onset. Do you know why it's delayed? What's going on there that we don't feel it straight after we've done it?
No, probably not. Probably something to do with that sleep. What's the word? Habit pattern. In the meantime, we've gone to bed. The body's processed it. The body is trying to do its own thing. And as I said, pain is a protection. It's a warning system. It's telling us you've done something different here. This is why we do what's that word? That graded approach. We don't really encourage the same type of training, the same gym program every day. Good PTs are now prescribing maybe upper limbs one day, lower limbs the next day, core the next day, aerobic fitness the next day. We're mixing up what we're targeting because, as I said, going back to those protocols, it's about optimal loading. We don't want complete rest, but we're trying to just mix it up and train different bodily systems. So a little, I'm sitting on the fence again, really, aren't I? But a little bit of rest is needed, but not too much rest. But yeah, letting the body do its own thing is probably the moral of my story there.
Brilliant. No, thank you, Faye. Our last question tonight but covers lots of different topics, but I'm going to throw a few at you at sort of pace, if you like, because we are coming to the end of our time. What could you tell me about plantar fascia, first of all? The parents asked.
Plantar fasciitis, so there is indeed this piece of fascia, this piece of tissue that sits underneath the foot. Helps provide that arch underneath our foot and then connects over the calcaneum goes to our Achilles and then up to our calf complex. And again, linked to that thing, again, that we saw a lot of at Nationals last year, that Sever's disease, that heel pain, everything in that whole area around the ankle and the calf and the foot can just get a little bit tight and inflamed, particularly that piece of fascia that sits under the foot. And can get quite tight then when we want to take a step and walk forward. Typically, really painful that first step getting out of bed in the morning. But I'm guessing the question is going to be how to deal with it, how to best manage it. Again, it's going to come back to that strength and conditioning programming, working on that calf and ankle and foot complex to get good contractibility, good length, and good strength through all of those tissues so that we can indeed take good toe off and walk normally.
And it's one of the parts of the body that we don't really think about focusing on our feet, isn't it? We sort of tend to exercise on our feet, but
Yeah.
not on our actual feet, if you know what I mean. And what about calf tightness? You mentioned that there is connected.
Yeah. So again, depending how much time you've got, I've probably reiterated moving away from stretching. There's definitely still a place for stretching. So again, that's going to achieve that length through the calf. And then yeah, some nice calf raises going up onto your tiptoes and back down again. So you're getting that contractibility of that calf complex. Yeah.
And improving hip stability.
Hip stability, common in boys. Lots of the boys I used to play against, and this is what Andy Murray got as well. That sort of hip impingement, that anterior hip pain, can mimic the hip flexor pain. So, indeed, your son was right to get help for that psoas problem because it could have got worse. Could have indeed turned into something nasty. But yeah, lots. I would look at the glute muscles, big, powerful lower limb muscles, help with a lot of that loading down when we are bending our knees to push up to play forehands, backhands, ground strokes, serves. But I would also always look at glute muscle functioning and patterning. And yeah, do some strengthening of those big glute muscles.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. I mean, the final question that the parent asked was about neurodiversity. Now, I don't know whether that's in your remit, but I don't know what implications there are for a child with neurodiversity in terms of physiotherapy.
I'll probably just use that as a vehicle to reiterate, hopefully, the moral I've tried to reiterate through this whole call in that it all comes back to a good, thorough assessment. There is no one size fits all. This should be an S&C plan. This should be a physio care plan for every child. Go and get a good assessment, but also do your research. Use peers that have seen physios, S&C coaches. It'll come down to the rapport that the child has with them as to whether they buy into what they say, whether they adhere to the homework that they give them, through their rehab plan, and yeah, how they communicate with your child and your child's preferences as well. So yeah, do some research on somebody they're going to get on well with, work for, and who will yeah assess and see your child in the most timely way.
Faye, you've been so brilliant. We've absolutely loved listening to all of your advice. You've got fantastic experience in this area, and you've been incredibly generous with your time this evening. We've covered so much, and I've really, really enjoyed listening to what you've had to say. So many, many thanks for that from the tennis parents community. And good luck with your career and your journey carries on in tennis in one way or another. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Kay. Thank you for all your organising. Thanks for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully, not too much of a whistle stop tour. Hopefully, there's been some points in there to take forward.
Absolutely. No, it's been brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone who joined us this evening. And do watch out for our next Q&As coming along soon. They'll all be advertised through the Instagram account and also through our Facebook account. So enjoy the rest of the weekend and we'll see you again soon. Thank you for now.